Hello, this is Jim Schaefer, executive producer and host of Rip Rap, the academic book television program. Our guest today is Randall Baier, and we'll be talking about books that Rip Rap has received for review. And then you got the Rubber Duck book here.
Well, this is a mix of I guess you'd call it there are sections in here that are almost whimsical, but it's research on the secret danger of everyday things, especially unseen chemicals in our every product we touch. And so it's called The Slow Death by Rubber Duck, Rick Smith and Bruce Laurie. And they talk about, through various aspects of literally everyday things that we touch. What is the lining of a Coke can? The rubber duck itself, what is in it? Breathing of, I just read a term in here as we were preparing, off-gassing of carpets. Heavy plastics.
Plastic bottles into water.
Yes, plastic bottles into the drinking water that is contained in the bottle. And Teflon, the pervasiveness of Teflon. In fact, they use as one of their allegories a routine that was done on Saturday Night Live almost 40 years ago, 1975, by Dan Aykroyd and Gilda Radner, where one of them is eating a whipped cream dessert like a pudding, and the other one is spraying the same substance and cleaning the floor. They're having a fight. You know, sweet clean is a dessert food. No, it's a floor cleaner. And they go back and forth. And the announcer says, "Stop! You're both right." And it's Teflon, which we think of Teflon being on pans. Make your pancakes, non-stick pans, but it's actually on virtually any number of products that are. I'm trying to think of one, I just out of my mind, but that they mention in the book. So the book goes through a series of discussions. I guess it's on the same tone as the cell phone radiation, although the cell phone disconnect is about one thing. This is about many types of products that are developed, coming out of everyday life that are really could be really scary for people, especially the repeated ingesting of stuff over time.
We like new technology, but we don't check it out before we use it. I read a statistic that I forgot how many thousands of new chemicals are developed each year, and only a fraction are tested. So we have no idea about toxicity, and they just use them.
They're right to the point. There's discussion here about the banning of a substance which is used in Coke cans, BPA, in California, and the comment is that ordinarily a state would not be banning a substance that really is affecting something on the national level. That would be for the Food and Drug Administration or others. But in fact, the federal government toxicity standards had been so relaxed since the mid-'70s that actually California just took the effort to do this and got a bill through to ban BPAs in certain substances.
Well, our twin grandsons, we just discovered that same thing that was in the baby bottles.
Yeah. In fact, the baby bottle came up in this argument. Yeah.
And so, Karen started becoming aware of that.
Right.
And did some reading about it, and then we were working with, my son and daughter-in-law about changing away from those baby bottles and other cups like that, the sippy cups. Because they all had the same liner, the same plastic in them that was leaching into the water. And it's bad stuff.
So the author here, the whimsical part of this book, based on the research, is his confrontation with decision making, what he calls the ketchup decision. And he's in a total dilemma. It's not a two-horn dilemma. It's a 3 or 4 prong dilemma. He's in the store and he describes looking at the counter. And first of all, he says, all right, now the non-organic, non-local, commercially made, like Heinz and Hunt's, those sort of food that doesn't come from my local area, that's in a plastic bottle, okay, I'm going to exclude that. So now I come to this product that's organic, all organic ketchup, low sweetener, whatever, made with sugar, not with corn syrup, all this stuff. But it's in a plastic bottle. And invariably the plastic, okay, that's one. Then there's a local ketchup that's made from, in a small zone, very low footprint in terms of carbon, because they don't ship far, you know, they make it locally. That's in a plastic bottle. And then he comes to the glass bottle of Heinz ketchup, which is non-local, made internationally or whatever, made across the country with, you know, completely and non-organic product. So in the end, he chickens out, and he buys the organic, but in plastic, because he says, I've got 2 kids that are going to smear the ketchup all over their head, probably not eat that much, and it'll be gone over a fast cycle, so maybe it won't be ingested. But the basic outcome is local, organic, low footprint, contained in glass, because glass is but glass, who does glass?
They don't even have mayonnaise.
Glass is like shishi now, to pack in glass. I mean, you go to local stores and you see this locally made Bubba's or something, Bubby's pickles. They're like $9 they're $9 a bottle. It's a glass bottle made in Detroit. It's local. It's all fresh cukes from Detroit. Well, maybe they bring the cukes from California. I don't know. They make them all year long, but you get my drift. Anyway, that's the whimsical part of the research. It's like, what do? We have to cut the Gordian knot somehow.
People may grow locally, but they have the same problems with distribution and
Yes.
packaging, and
Yeah.
that's where they get you.
Yeah.
You know, so
Yeah.
then you got to use what's available.
Right.
But you know, we're a victim of our own success, I think, to a certain extent.
Yeah.
Today.
So this is but you know, the message is know your culture. Learn what is going on. I mean, I think there's a message in all of this for us, and that is, it's the secret danger. It's the unhidden radiation. It's the stuff that gets put under the rug that, if you look at pure research, it's so discrete and so one-dimensional. How does the average citizen look at, you know, a highly rarefied report by scientific researchers, testers, versus that sort of true believer side that the world's going to fall apart? You know, if you know.
Well, I think it points out the need for really looking at the research.
Don't have dandelions.
Having it as sort of a, you know, incidental side play. It's really central to existence. I think the other thing is that in consumerism, you can change the market by what you buy.
Mm-hmm.
But people have got to organize to change the market. They can't, it's just not kind of willy-nilly kind of thing. They really need to have intentionality to show,
Right.
You know, because the dollars win. So if people were saying, this is what we want, and this is what we'll buy in some kind of coherent fashion, the people who are manufacturing will comply.
Mm-hmm.
But as long as people just accept it and buy it out of convenience and not really work for change.
Convenience and low cost, and the low cost is, people will make the argument, and I didn't mean to pick on Bubby's pickles, because they are local to Detroit, so somebody might see this on cable access, and I'm putting down Bubby's pickles, but they taste they're good. But if you look at the cost, maybe one could make the argument that the $9 bottle of Bubby's pickles with the same comparable weight, and the $4.50 bottle of Heinz pickles or Vlasic or one of those big, maybe actually, given the carbon footprint, the cost, the workers that aren't being paid as well, the toxicity, maybe there's actually a fair trade-off. I think that's the economic balance, that the hidden cost or the hidden balance that's not there.
Well, there's also the Walmart effect, and that is, it was kind of implicit what you were saying. With this high volume delivered product, which people like Walmart talk about, that we can give you cheap prices because we handle so much product, that there's a trade-off in that, you know, Walmart is now supposedly selling organic food, But in order to have that happen, they've worked with the FDA in reducing the standards of what's regarded as organic food. So people are buying.
Because they can call the shots on what's organic or
That's
not.
right,
Yeah.
because they're a big market.
They might be able, an organic field has to have at least, I think, 7, according to the organic, a lot of those that were developed in California, I think it's a 7-year, it has to go at least 7 years before the soil exchange and whatever, where you can actually say it's organic. But maybe that kind of standard is being changed. That's scary.
It is being changed.
Yeah. And
so then what's called organic is now not what people would have called organic before,
right.
because they don't have to be certified as strictly. And their farming is done at a much looser guidelines. And so that thing you said about California is quite true. I
Right.
mean, the FDA has radically diluted its requirements.
Can I just make a retraction officially for our cable access viewers? I did not mean to pick on Bubby's pickles. I was actually, to be honest, thinking of McClure's pickles.
I see.
But I think Bubby's and McClure's are both made locally.
All right.
But at any rate, I must say that homemade pickles in glass at your house or others' houses, that is a really good solution to the dilemma of the slow death by rubber duck.
See, that's what we're paying for our convenience.
Yeah,
Instead of taking the time to buy the product and can it and save it and use it, we want to just go to the supermarket or the box store or whatever and buy whatever we want in whatever quantity at our convenience and pay the least amount of money for it. Another book here that I found really fascinating is by Tom Roper, The Prism of Grammar, How Child Language Illuminates Humanism.
Wow.
Isn't that interesting?
That's right up our alley. So tell me,
well,
what is that about?
What this guy is doing is trying to analyze what we hear in terms of what he calls inner grammar. And there's finding the standards for the grammar by listening and then deconstructing it. And I just thought that was really interesting, and particularly when you're using children who are in a state of innocence.
Yeah. Well, what kind of child language does he look at?
Just what they're saying.
Is he looking at a particular demographic, a certain...
No, it's just, he takes, I like this sentence. Dialogue seems to give us license to reach back to a streamlined grammar, just the one the child starts with. Now there's a chunk of a thought, just the dialogue, for example, if you use basic constructions like, when are you playing? Noon. Where are you going? Detroit. You're starting to deconstruct what they're doing, how they're doing it, what's happening. And
so what, okay, that's fine, but where's the humanism? Give me the punchline. This is fascinating.
I find it's fascinating because when I was going to MSU, I took what's called transformational grammar. And that was came out of the work by the people who were looking at artificial intelligence. And so instead of looking at grammar and what should be, they looked at, similar to this, the sentence structure that happens. They're trying to understand the step-by-step formation of sentences. I thought this is really cool because it's looking at the process of expression, and it slows it down so you don't think, and that's similar to the point they're making here. When you're forming a sentence, you first think of your central concept, then you add the adjectives, and then the appropriate verb, and then if it's a verb that's active verb, then what's the object of it, and then the appropriate adjectives.
Right.
So you're really starting to look at how this all is taking place, by slowing it down. And the fascinating thing here is they're looking at how they're forming grammar, how the kids are, because it's at a different level. It's a less conscious level, so maybe you're getting a little more.
I have a thought. I mean, I've always been interested or liked talking to children or thinking about the way they construct their logic, because it's always struck me as very metaphorical, at least very condensed, so that a young child can say, me shop mommy, or something like that, or me shop, or they put complete concepts together in one word. It's incredibly poetic, actually. But how does that flesh out and develop? And there's a parallel, I think, with...
That's what I'm talking about, is how does this emerge so that it's coherent to other people?
Right.
And that's through this dialogic intervention back and forth.
Right.
Or interaction, which is between other people, so that meaning is exchanged. It's accurate.
Right.
And they'll try inaccurate things, but it has a lot to do with shaping the meaning.
Yeah, right.
And here in this one, they're talking about the pantheon of plurals and ethical modularity.
The pantheon of plurals, right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so here you're talking about the difficulty that children have with the notion of variable, that not everything is the same. When you add another component in, it shifts the meaning.
Well, boy, it's certainly true in English grammar.
Yeah.
I mean, you can say so many things in different ways, and when you substitute, I will have versus I would have, whatever. I'm not picking the best examples, but there are ways to talk about the present in so many different shapes, and when you change the shape of one of those predicates, then everything else happens.
About here is that this problem can appear in the grammar of any language. So when the problem's exact nature and its connection to cognition and other realms of how we process senses remain unresolved. In other words, you add this factor in, how does everything else shifts?
Shifts, right.
And the poor kid is saying, what?
Right.
How am I going to
how do I do this?
Something? How am I going
and yet in the context of their learning, they figure it out over time.
And then another thing that they talk about is the role of readers in shaping their grammar. Because it's not always helpful. It can be even negative.
You mean like the McGuffey reader? You mean like the class book, textbook readers, right?
Because there's presumptions
school readers
behind the readers and what they think they're supposed to be doing.
It's a cultural kind of thing.
So the kid may have a very ethical interpretation of what's going on, but the reader is taking him away from that towards something else. And I thought, boy, this is
well, that's been a critique of reading books, graduated reading books for, I think, a long time in education, and ways to teach speaking and reading.
Here's something
reading and
you're
writing.
Interested in is the role of one-to-one mapping in terms of what they call distributivity.
Yeah.
Because it said it's like a stereoscopic in vision and sound. But in other words, this is another element of trying to figure out what you're saying. You have to do this one-on-one mapping to figure out what you are saying and how that's working.
A second ago I was going to say, and now I'll bring this up because the sound aspect's really interesting. I was thinking about the metaphor, the condensed way children will speak whole concepts. And then you look at modern day texting, writing, like on cell phones or, in Twitter. These, condensed, you have to be very efficient to get a message and you go to the minimum. Just like THX means thanks and whatnot. People collapse the word probably into probably. I've seen it on any number of messages, but it's a sound thing. If you say probably really fast, it sounds like probably. So there's a condensation, not with words. They don't do PRBLY. They spell out something that sounds like it, but it's a text.
That's the issue of modularity.
I guess that's it. Yeah.
That you're learning to distinguish, but it's an alternate modularity. In other words, you would learn to express it using one grammar that's far more elaborate, but because of the technology, now we have to use a much truncated version of the same thing. So we got to develop modularity to deal with that, which I find I'm just kind of drawn into this stuff. Here's something to think about. Do not extend a judgment about the character of one mental module to another module. Now, that's one of those statements that I'm thinking, wow, that's pretty deep.
You can't translate the logic of one structure to another.
You respect the module for what it is.
Yeah.
And don't...
Well, it's interesting in language because, in adult language, I guess, native speakers versus non-native speakers, you know, I think it's characteristic of maybe bilingual speakers, but they have a primary language. They speak the second language with the grammatical logic of their first native language. So somebody might be speaking English to you, and you go, oh, this person's completely you know, fluent in English, or vice versa. I might be speaking Dutch to somebody, and they'll say, oh, you're perfect. But my grammar is coming from my native language. So I'm speaking Dutch, but then something doesn't quite work, and it's actually my English grammar that's messed it up.
And actually, that's a chapter here on language variation, emotion overtakes structure. And what they're talking about is, it leads into a discussion here about bilingual.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That they said we've acknowledged the social side of grammar, but we remain far from explaining why grammar exerts such an emotional force in a response to other people.
Mm-hmm.
And we really judge people by their grammar.
Mm-hmm. Oh, he's she or he, I don't know who the author was.
He, Tom.
See, there's grammar right there. I mean, I have to recognize the gender of the writer. Talking about the fact that whether one has good grammar or not. Do you know it's very common in Michigan, I think, or the Midwest, to say, me and Heather went over to school today.
I know. I get that with my students all the time.
Or her and I. And that's, I've decided that this is local practice. You know, I hadn't heard that but it seems to be something, and I've noticed it first in my, you know, I didn't notice it in other places where I've lived. It seems regional to me.
Well, and then if you apply the grammatical...
But it works. I mean, everybody says it, so who's to say it's not right?
But to me, that indicates, in terms of grammar, is taking positions of, instead of subjectivity, of objectivity. You're receiving the action and not handing it out. And so you're a more passive participant. Yeah.
Well, that's a nice analytical way to put it, but it's very interesting. Maybe it's taking the passive and reactifying it, making it actionable. I don't know.
Here's a big thought. Multiple grammars and inside vocabulary. We all have an intuition about our internal multiple grammars from vocabulary. English, for example, has Anglo-Saxon, Latinate, and Greek words and derivational rules to accompany them, such as rules that specify which suffixes can attach to which adjectives to form nouns.
Right, right.
Confusion arises because the divisions among vocabularies are not clean. And so they're talking about the word civil, which is a Latin adjective.
C-I-V-I-L. Yeah.
And adults and children accepted two nouns from that, civility and civilness. The same is true for other Latin adjectives, trivial, triviality, and trivialness, and fertile, fertility, and fertileness.
The ness words I rarely, if ever, hear.
But
I guess it makes sense. I mean,
it's been accepted in terms. Another one is multiple grammars inside syntax. That the idea of multiple grammars or universal bilingualism is a theoretical claim whose consequences overturn linguists' usual perspectives. Its case study is German inside English. An example would be, "Nothing," said Bill. Into the hall scampered the children.
Of course, the verbs at the sort of the direct object. Oh wait, it reverses. Right, yeah. Well, it's sort of like Yoda speak.
Which has moved the main verb to second position in all main clauses.
Exactly. Impressed with this one I am.
Meet ate Bill. Meet ate Bill. There sings John. At home cooks Fred. All Germanic syntax.
Which one shall we pick, Jim?
You want to do Ecology?
Great. Great cover. Just without looking at the title now, black, red, and white. The core value of design perfection. This is like a design Iconic design law, right?
With an exclamation point.
With an exclamation point. Panicology. What's there to be afraid of? Good Lord, the whole world is in a panic. Here's another social analysis of social construction. We've got slow death, but there's a theme tonight. Slow death by rubber duck, disconnect with radiation, and then finally panic. Everything is in panic. This is in the spirit, of course, the blurb on the back, in the spirit of Freakonomics and the tipping point. The tipping point I really sort of picked up as a kind of pop metaphor. Here's a smart guide for determining the real level of danger behind many media-hyped threats.
Well, this is actually quite an important issue because the media is always driven by crisis and makes more crisis out of it than it needs
right.
to.
It invents crisis,
when,
actually,
you know,
doesn't it?
Bill and Kate got married in England, that was a crisis of sorts.
Right,
Because, of
right.
course, it evoked Princess Di and her
Exactly.
death and all that stuff.
And yet the two of them had what seemed to be a perfectly normal wedding. And they'd been living together.
Right.
You know, they had
They
like
just cranked on that. Everybody who was connected with media or any kind of. In fact, I heard there were bidding wars going on about commentators who could have a British accent and say something about the wedding. You know? And then the thing with Osama bin Laden, there's all these people going around ballyhooing themselves as experts about Osama bin Laden.
Yeah.
And they stay on these stories. And then we've had the tornadoes and hurricanes and snowstorms.
Right.
And it's this constant.
And Japan.
Yeah.
The thing is, there is tragedy or drama or reality of some kind there to begin with.
But then we can only stay on it for a certain period of time.
It gets modulated up. Yeah. It gets, increased.
There's a limit to how much the media will stay there. And thank you for being on RipEb again.
You're welcome. I'm glad to be here yet again and make sure my life is structured a safer way.
Thank you.